And good evening, and we are live, season 2, conversation number 8. And we have Shri Kollegala Sharma as our guest today. These conversations are brought to you by the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, which is a unit of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. These conversations hope to bring speakers and people from a wide range of backgrounds and spanning topics of development, social issues, leadership, education, and culture. Like I said, we have Shri Sharma as a guest today. Shri Sharma is a retired chief scientist from the CSIR, the Central Food Technological Research Institute, Mysuru, and an acclaimed science communicator in Kannada and English. A postgraduate in science, he has had a stint in science reporter as its assistant editor. And before moving to Mysuru, where he continued his science communication activities as a columnist in popular newspapers. His column in Kannada Prabha is known to be the second longest standing science column in Kannada and was published every week for 16 years. Sri Sharma has published over 2,000 articles in Kannada and 250 in English. He also has experience in creating and scripting programs for All India Radio and has been a coordinator for Vigyan Prasar Bharati for programs in Kannada during 2008 and 13. He has scripted over 75 radio dramas and helped train scriptwriters in writing and editing scripts for radio. He's closely associated with 5 community radios in Karnataka in planning and preparing science programs. Besides, he has started the first podcast in Kannada and the first science podcast in any Indian language, which has completed 4 years, 800 episodes, and reaches out directly to 3,000 listeners. It's an absolute pleasure, sir, to have you as our guest today. And we welcome you to this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Ramesh.
Sir, as you know, in this conversation, we generally talk about a variety of topics. So we'll start with, could you tell us a little about your childhood days, sir? How they were spent and the ecosystem in which you were embedded. Did your childhood shape the Kollegala Sharma of today? Did it shape the Kollegala Sharma of the future? That is, if you look back to your childhood. And if yes, how and in what ways? So a fairly detailed question, but I thought I'd start
asking a 60-year-old to talk about childhood is a dangerous issue because you have so many things to talk about childhood at this age. Probably the time will not be. So of course, every future is shaped by the childhood, the experiences that we have, the dreams that we dream, or probably the education that we get. All these things combined usually shape our dreams. And I say that because ನಮ್ಮ ಕನಸುಗಳು ಯಾವಾಗ ನಮ್ಮ ಚಿಕ್ಕನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಬರುತ್ತೋ ಆ ಕನಸುಗಳನ್ನು ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ನಾವು ಮುಂದೆ ದೊಡ್ಡವರಾಗ್ತಾ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ. ಕೆಲವು ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶಗಳು ತುಂಬಾ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಒದಗಿ ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಕೆಲವು ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು actually look for opportunities, find the opportunities or create opportunities for ourselves. ಆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು. My childhood happened in a very small village. I should say not a small village, it's a small town, Kollegala, which is very popular, and that's where my pen name comes. And the Kollegala at that time in 1960s when I was a boy was a growing town. So we had only a few schools, a handful of schools, and there was only one college, and literally there was no library except in the schools. And even in the school where I studied, teachers were good, but we didn't have the resources that we find available today to so many other people. Okay, why I'm telling this is the times have changed. I don't say that we grew up in a very difficult times. That time, the norms of that time was like that. ಆ ಕಾಲನೇ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲವೂ ಕೂಡ ಅದೇ ಸ್ಥಿತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇತ್ತು. ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಳೆದು ಬಂದವರು ಹಾಗೆ ಇದ್ರು. ಆ ವರ್ಷದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಟ್ಟಿದಂತಹ ದೇಶ ಇವತ್ತು ನಮಗೆ ಈ ಸವಲತ್ತುಗಳನ್ನ ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದಿದು. ಬಟ್ ಆ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ವೈ ಡಿಡ್ ಐ ಚೂಸ್ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಎ ಕ್ವಶನ್. Probably there were two things. One, there was a book which was very influential at that time. ನಮ್ಮ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಂತ ರೊಡ್ಡಂ ನರಸಿಂಹಯ್ಯ ಅವರ ಫೇಮಸ್ ಸೈಂಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಅವರು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ಹೋದ ವರ್ಷ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅವರು ಕಾಲವಾದರು. ಅಂಡ್ his father was a very popular science writer, and he had written a book on stars. Okay, stars are always made, or dreams are always made of stars. So when I read that book, I still remember the first paragraph where he describes the universe. He describes that the stars that we see are so many in number, we cannot count them. And he says, if this is the distance between the sun and earth, and the distance between each star is many times more, you just imagine how vast the universe is. This book I read when I was in fourth standard or something like that, and it just affected my imagination so much that I wanted to know more about science. But then that was an age where, comprehending science is not easy. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಆ ಸಣ್ಣ ವಯಸ್ಸಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನಮಗೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಇದು ಬಹುಶಃ ನಾವು ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರಾಗಿ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಗಮನದಲ್ಲಿ ಇಟ್ಕೊಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ತಮ್ಮ ಸ್ವಾನುಭವ ಹಾಗೂ ಕಲ್ಪನೆ ಇವೆರಡರ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ಆ ಒಂದು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಇವೆರಡು ಬೇರೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ವಾಟ್ ವಿ ಇಮ್ಯಾಜಿನ್, ವಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಥಿಂಕ್ ದಟ್ ವಿ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಫೀಲ್, or what we feel, we think that is the only thing that we can understand. ಇದಕ್ಕೊಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಏನಂತಂದ್ರೆ, when I was a kid, those were the times when we had a lot of fantastic movies. Fantastic, I say, because they used to be fantasy movies, especially Telugu movies, and many of them were told stories about Ramayana or Mahabharata. And this one of them was Dashavataram.
I thought you would say Maya Bazaar.
No, Maya Bazaar, yes, is there, but Dashavataram affected me a lot, especially when it comes to science. And when I saw Dashavataram, a few days before that, we had the Koina earthquake, and then there was a earthquake also in Chennai. So these were the things which we had read in the newspaper. My father used to read it out for me, and probably I was curious about what is the earthquake and how does it happen and all. But then subsequently we went on a second show for this Dashavataram. And in Dashavataram, the legend is that the earth is held by the Varahavatara. Right? And
earth is brought out of this.
Yes. So it is beautifully depicted on that movie, and at that time, with that technology, it was mesmerizing. But then it also put me into sort of a confusion, because if the earth is inside water, if it is rotating, okay, where do I go? When do I go and fall into the sea? Oh, that was the child's dilemma. Okay, I thought someday we all will go and drop into the sea. So this troubled me so much, I couldn't sleep that day, and I troubled my father, who could not answer. So I started asking everyone. I asked my teacher, she was not able to answer. So this is what made me to seek the answer. Once the curiosity is there, so the mind starts seeking the answer. And if appropriate resources are there, appropriate guidance is there, then the right answers will be sought. Okay, every guru has to be like that. But many times what happens is that if the guru is also not aware of the actual things, then things go wrong.
I will just step in a little bit here. Sorry to interrupt you, but there are two things that you made. I thought I should, ಆ ಥ್ರೆಡ್ ಅನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ 2-3 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಕೇಳಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸ್ತು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಬೈ ಥ್ರೆಡ್ ಗೆಟ್ಸ್ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಸಮ್ಟೈಮ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ಒಂದು ನೀವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ, ನಿಮಗೆ ನಿದ್ದೆ ಬರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋದು. That is something that pricked me. ಒಂದು ಎರಡನೇದು, the second thing that you said, which also was interesting, is that curiosity. Your curiosity about how did the earth in fact get submerged at all, and nobody could ask you answer. Just wanted to ask this question. Today I have a feeling children have stopped asking questions because answers are very easily available. Would you agree with me on that? I think the fact that answers are very easily available at the tip of their fingers is counterproductive in one sense.
I don't think that is the thing. They have one answer. I also had an answer. The answer was that the earth rotates. Okay, and that we all had the answer. But then there is the other lesson also, that, or the other understanding, which was bringing the confusion. The same thing happens even today to a child. Okay, now the information that he has is only part. It's not complete information. So unless you have a complete awareness, there will be doubts. these doubts are the ones which create curiosity. Okay, it is very well known that yes, metals are conductors, and therefore they get heated very well, and all these things. That is fine, but a child can always have a curious question to see, unless we stop the child from asking those questions, he will always find whether all metals will have the same type or not. These are simple questions which scientists have asked. They appear very common, but these simple questions are the ones which have led to the development of science or evolution of science. ಬಹಳ ಸರಳವಾದ, ನಮಗೆ ಅನುಮಾನ ಬರುವಂತ, ಎಲ್ಲಾದ್ರೂ ಒಂದ್ ಕಡೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಸಂದೇಹ ಹುಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಕ್ಕೆ ಆ ಸಾಮಾನ್ಯ ಸಂದೇಹಗಳು ಅವುಗಳೇ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ದಿವಸ ನಾವು ಈ ಮಟ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನವನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗಿರುವಂತದ್ದು. ನಾವು ಹುಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೆ ಹೇಗೆ, ವೇರ್ ಡಿಡ್ ವಿ ಕಮ್ ಫ್ರಮ್, how does a birth happen, is the the process of birth in a human or an animal same or different, and if it is different, why different? Okay, or when did this start, ಮೂಲ ಎಲ್ಲಿ, ಈ ಎಲ್ಲದರದ್ದು ಮೂಲ ಎಲ್ಲಿ, ಈ ಪ್ರಪಂಚ ಯಾಕೆ ಹೀಗಿದೆ, ನಮಗೆ ಯಾಕೆ ನೋವಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಕಣ್ಣೀರು ಯಾಕೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ, ಪ್ರಾಣಿಗಳು ಕಣ್ಣೀರು ಅಳ್ತಾವ, ಅವು ಅಳೋದಿಲ್ವಾ? These are the curious questions even now every child asks.
Sorry. These are questions that, okay. Now you said, no, I just wanted to ask if these are questions that you asked, but you answered that question by saying these are questions that every child asks. While while you were going through the journey of your childhood and all of that, one of the things that I wanted to ask is, were there specific people, or were there certain factors? One of them obviously was that the trigger of that movie as well, that started that curiosity and put you on a journey of working with, and we will come to the how you've you went beyond only working in the area of science. You moved into science communication also, but I'll come to that little. But were there specific people that you recall who added in one sense, who fueled that curiosity of yours, who helped you along in that journey that you've taken? And
there are a few things that mattered at that time. One was that I grew up in a I should say not a well-to-do family, so in a large family. Families were large at that time. Okay, it was a norm. Like I said, one of the norms. So what happened was, I was also, for my age, a famished child, a small and not well grown up and not strong, sort of a weak person and an introvert, added to all these things. So essentially in my class, so all others would be bullies for me. So to compete with them either in sports or anything was not possible for me. So I had to find my niche. That was the reading and then writing and other things. So reading helped me a lot to get out of that kind of a pressure or the stress that a child finds. Second thing is, my parents never interfered in what I did. So this is something that I should acknowledge, in the sense that they always saw to it that they were not able to provide all the resources that I would require, but at least they did not stop me from looking for books, looking for these things. And in case if I was happy reading a book, they would encourage that, and they will go out of the way to get a book for me. So that is something that always helped me. I still remember, ನಾನು 10ನೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತೊಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋದಾಗ, my father used to take me to Avenue Road because he knew that there are lots of books. And remember, he was only 5+ standard pass, but he had a lot of knowledge. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗಿ ನನಗೆ ಯಾವ ಬುಕ್ ಬೇಕೋ ಎಲ್ಲಾನು ಕೊಡಿಸ್ತಾ ಇರೋರು, every book. And that is where I first saw National Geographic. That's where I first laid my hands on Scientific American. And that's where I took up books of the famous Hard Times and Oliver Twist, not Oliver, that's another one. The British author, I forget his name. He was the journalist, and then he became quite famous. And Hard Times is one of his books which I still remember. So these are the books that I used to buy, all second hand, because that is affordable.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
then read.
Avenue Road and those places, yeah.
Yes,
Typically,
yes.
you know, those are things even we remember, because many of the books we picked up then were also
Exactly.
from Avenue Road and those kind of
Yes.
roads in Bangalore. Where
Yes, yes. So this is one thing. So
are you referring to Bill Bryson as well?
Bill Bryson, yes, Bill Bryson I have read, but only after growing up,
Only
after becoming a science communicator, not before that.
Right.
So those were the times when those are all classic authors of English literature.
Right.
And yeah.
So the thing is that you know, one of the questions that's come through the chat anyway, but I'll ask that also. We made that mention, you know, right at the beginning itself, that you're a prolific writer. Has the writing influenced the communicator in you, or is has the writing in a way influenced how you think, how you do? Is the writing a product of your thinking, or is or how does the whole thing play out? The writing,
to be frank, I have never thought about how writing has influenced my thinking, or my thinking has influenced the writing. When we were in a graduate course, undergraduate course, BSc, one book influenced me a lot. That was Dr. B.G.L. Swami's Hasuru Honnu. And it has influenced a lot of other people also. But interesting thing about that was a very difficult topic, which, you know, I was also a botany student at the time. So learning botany, especially taxonomy, classification of different plants and this, ಸಸ್ಯಗಳನ್ನು ವರ್ಗೀಕರಣ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದನ್ನು ಗುರುತಿಸೋದು, ಅದು ಯಾವ ವರ್ಗಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇರಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಇದನ್ನ taxonomy ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. And doing that was a very, I would always say, mundane job, or learning was most of the time sort of a rote learning or things like that. So he made it very interesting in Hasuru Honnu. So I used to always think, see, if he has made it so much interesting, why can't our teachers make it interesting? So this was the question. Subsequently, I wanted to become his student, and that's why I chose University of Mysuru, because he had come from Chennai to Mysuru. Unfortunately, before I finished my graduation, he was not there. So I missed the opportunity to even see him. But then I had decided by then that either I will do botany. So I chose botany. I could not get through to get a seat in the botany MSc course. But then I chose the next department, very next to the botany. That was in zoology. So that's how I landed up in zoology MSc. But then MSc course taught me a lot. I would always say zoology alli nanu genetic specialization ತಗೊಂಡಿದ್ದೆ.
But closely connected, because I also studied cell biology and
okay. Those were the times, you know, 1980s. Those were the times lots of things were happening ಆ time ಅಲ್ಲಿ. So ಹಾಗಾಗಿ genetics was one of the most important things, at least in India. But ಅದರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ನನಗೆ I got exposed to evolution at that time, the theory of evolution, how it happened.
And I think that theory that sorry, but just to butt in, but I thought the theory of evolution and Charles Darwin's you know, that magnum opus,
Origin of Species,
I think that was, I mean, people talk of many things, but particularly in this area of science, I personally believe that, you know, Origin of Species changed so much of assumptions. It changed not just science, but it had an influence across the board. You know, its influence on religion, its influence on religious beliefs, its influence on the church in particular, its influence on all religious institutions has been. It fundamentally, it was like an earthquake that shifted, you know, thinking in a very fundamental way.
Yeah, and it also made me, simultaneously, I also came across Desmond Morris, an author. Right. Desmond Morris wrote a lot of books like Man Watching, then Intimate Behavior. So he was looking, he had a glass of Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, or the Natural Selection, and other glasses, and he was looking at the human behavior through that. That was the time when Evo Wilson and others put together the theory of social evolution. Social evolution, or sociobiology, what we call today as sociobiology, Samaja Jiva Shastra. That means ಪ್ರಾಣಿಗಳು ಒಟ್ಟಾಗಿ ಸಮಾಜದಲ್ಲಿ ಜೀವಿಸುವುದಕ್ಕೂ ಮತ್ತೆ ಇವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಅನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಇದಕ್ಕೂ ಏನು ಸಂಬಂಧ ಇದೆ? ಅಥವಾ ಹೀಗೂ ಹೇಳಬಹುದು, ನಾವು ಮನುಷ್ಯರು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಡ್ಕೊಳ್ತೀವೋ ಈ ನಡವಳಿಕೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ ಪ್ರಾಣಿಗಳಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ ದಾಟಿ ಬಂದಂತದ್ದು, ನಾವು ವಿಶೇಷ ಏನಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಚಾರ್ಲ್ಸ್ ಡಾರ್ವಿನ್ಸ್ ಥಿಯರಿ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಆಲ್ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ says the same thing, that we are part of a more organic world rather than a separate animal, okay, a separate creation. Okay, so this is something that I got very much interested, because Desmond Morris very beautifully had brought out all these things. See how my actions, like if I am doing some action like this, what does it indicate under different contexts? If I am holding something like this, so that shows that I am trying to protect myself. That means there is a danger that I am anticipating. Maybe the person who is next to me could be more powerful than me. Okay, so these were some of the things that made me think a lot about Charles Darwin. And other thing, I started reading a lot more about evolution, a lot more about literature, and that's how I started. At the time, one important thing was the immunology as a science was developing fast. There were lots of things happening, and we were not able to find the resources even in English in the popular literature. Forget about Kannada. So that's when I thought we should all talk about these things and start conveying this. I started writing, so in small ways. My first article got published in Prajavani as a front page article, and I was surprised, because I always thought that, you know, you need to pull strings to get into the publication field and all. But as a novice, as a student, when I could publish that, you know, that was a lot of encouragement. I must thank the sub-editors there, especially Nagesh Hegde. I didn't know that he was the one who was instrumental in that, but later I came to know that Sri Nagesh Hegde not only took the article to the people, but he also noticed that there is a person here who can write, and he gave this new he recommended my name to a lot more other people. So people started approaching me for from All India Radio and other things. I was surprised. I was just 22 or 23 then, and I was asked to write the small tidbits for All India Radio on advances in science. I was just stepping into the field of research, and when this opportunity comes, you will always feel exhilarated, and that pushed me to start writing a lot more, and I never looked at back. But once I started writing, ಒಂದ್ಸರ್ತಿ ಬರವಣಿಗೆಗೆ ನಾನು ಇಳಿದ ಮೇಲೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವಾರು ಅನುಮಾನಗಳು ಬರೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರುವಾಯಿತು. ನಾನು ಹೇಳೋದು ಕರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ, ನಾನು ಹೇಳೋದು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ತಲುಪುತ್ತಾ, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳಬೇಕು, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನು ಹೇಳೋದು ಸರಿನಾ, ಇದನ್ನು ಬಿಡೋದು ಸರಿನಾ? So these are some of the questions that I started asking. I never studied mass communication or journalism or anything as a formal education or formal degree course, but these are the questions, common sense questions, that I started asking and tried to find my own answers around.
I'm going to be coming to that, sir. Your communication. I'm just still in the process. One of the things, what I find interesting even during the conversation, and we have also had conversations offline, one thing that I found extremely interesting is, the easy way in which we can, that one is able to have a conversation with you on not just science, but on multiple subjects. So in that sense, I have found you to be, in one sense, a polymath. In the sense that, that we have discussed subjects outside of science also.
Yes.
Therefore, we know that. How is that? If you could briefly touch upon how that interests you on multiple subjects, while everybody knows about you as this person who has this expansive knowledge on science. I mean, it's not just one little topic or that or this kind of a thing. You seem to have a fairly, but you're also in one sense polymath, in the sense that you're able to also talk about other subjects. Obviously, that comes from some sort of deep interest that you have in reading, learning itself in general. Is that a fairly correct assumption to make, or are there specific?
Yeah, basically it is learning. It is learning because I keep on learning. What you said is, I have an expansive knowledge. You said the expanse is very right word, because it is not deep knowledge. So for a deep knowledge, you need to focus and you need to get into a lot. I do a lot of reading. So I do anything that interests me is a good subject to read. So I have not, made or I'm not bound by any boundaries in what I choose for reading. So it can be a poetry if I find it interesting. It can be a essay or novel, or even a pulp novel. So there is something to get from that. Why are pulp novels very popular, whereas the science articles are not popular? This is the question that as a practitioner of science writing or science communication, I started asking. And then, why is it difficult for children to learn science or teach science? Where are we doing mistakes? Or are we doing any mistake? What kind of mistakes, if we are doing, what kind of mistakes are those, and how do we identify and correct? So these are the questions I started asking, and I must say that I got a very good guru in Praveen Kumar. So these are questions that were only in my mind and I had never practiced. And I got an opportunity when I got in touch with Praveen Kumar to talk to students, talk to him and all these things. So we started discussing a lot of things. We had some common grounds. And that's when I found that my thinking, I had not done all these things as a formal study or anything. I had not even read, for example, Edward Bono at that time. And only after that, I started reading a lot of things. Then I understood that beyond science, whatever my thinking has been there, they are relevant. So I thought, if my experience in communication, what I do, what I have been practicing could also be useful elsewhere. And that could be in a classroom also. So this is how I entered into education field. So ಶಿಕ್ಷಣದಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಸಂವಹನ ಅಂತಾರ. ಸಂವಹನ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಕಲೆ, ಸಂವಹನ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಜೀವನ ರೀತಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬಳಸ್ಕೊಳ್ತೇವೆ, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಲ್ತ್ಕೊಳ್ತೇವೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಅಭ್ಯಾಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ, ಅದು ಕೂಡ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ ರೂಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ, ತರಗತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸ್ ಮಾಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿರೋದನ್ನ ಬೇರೆಯವರಿಗೆ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ದಾಟಿಸೋದಕ್ಕಾಗತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ಪರಿಕಲ್ಪನೆ ನನ್ನದು. ಸೊ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಕೇಶನ್ ಇಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ಬಟ್, ಇಫ್ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಆಫ್ ಎ ಆಪಲ್, ಐ ಮಸ್ಟ್ ಬಿ ಏಬಲ್ ಟು ಟೆಲ್ another person and convince him or make him imagine the same kind of apple in his mind without showing him that. So this is the communication. The concepts have to be clear. How do we tell that? So there are only two simple rules we need to follow. One is that we all have senses. So some experience we have. So if we can pick up from that experience and tell about using those experiences or relate to those experiences something that is unknown, it will be easier. This is one of the basic concepts of communication. And I later came to know that this is called from known to unknown.
From the known to the,
from familiar to unfamiliar.
And,
So,
and the whole process of
yes.
itself, I mean, to a large extent, life itself is the journey of the,
exactly.
from the known to the unknown and then
unknown. Yes.
So
yeah, please.
Yeah, no, if you have something, but this kutuhala, curiosity that you've consistently touched upon repeatedly in multiple ways over the last 20-25 minutes. Now this kutuhala, I have a very I'm going to make a kind of a devil's advocate kind of an argument with you now, rather point with you right now, and I would like you to either agree or disagree. So this kutuhala, curiosity, is often cited as a fundamental requirement for science, that you need to, or for that matter, any subject, because you can bring the principles of science to apply the principles of science to any subject. Now this, and we hear talk of how curiosity must be fostered in children. ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಕುತೂಹಲವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇದು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ. But my argument is that children are naturally curious, and in our attempts at fostering, we often end up causing more trouble than good.
No, the
I wanted your thoughts on that.
My thought is like this: the curiosity is there in everyone. Okay, even at this age, or you also have a lot of curiosity, otherwise you would not have conversed with me about knowing how I came out. The curiosity in you, how did this old man come to this? Okay, so that itself is a curious question. So these questions are always there with everyone. So what happens is that, do we have the right resources to find the right answers is the thing. There is no right answer or wrong answer. There is an answer, but many times what happens is that we consider what we see or what we perceive as the answer, which may not be the correct answer. ಅದು ಒಂದು ಸಮಸ್ಯೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಈಗ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಮೊನ್ನೆ ಒಂದು ಮಗು ನನಗೆ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಿತ್ತು. ಸಾಧಾರಣವಾಗಿ ನಾವೇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ, ಇಂಥ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ವಿ ಇಗ್ನೋರ್ ದೆಮ್. ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹೊತ್ತು ನಾಯಿಗಳಿಗೆ ದೆವ್ವ ಕಾಣುತ್ತಾ? Now that's a question. Okay, now I can always dismiss this saying that antad ಏನು ಇಲ್ಲ, ದೆವ್ವ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡಬಹುದು. But the curiosity will always remain for the child. ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ರು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೂ it will still watch the dog behavior and still get scared. That is possible. So how do we address this is one question. The curiosity will always be there.
That is a question I had when I was a child, because ನಮ್ಮ ಅಜ್ಜಿ ಒಬ್ಬ ಸತಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ರು,
okay,
ಈ ತರ ನೈಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ತರ ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು it is because the dogs can see ಅಂತ. ಸೊ ಪ್ರತಿ ಸತಿನೂ ನಾನು ಆ ತರ ಬಂದಾಗ even now I think of that.
ಈಗಲೂ ಬಹುಶಃ ಎಲ್ಲರ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ಇದನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿರ್ತಾರೆ. ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹೊತ್ತಲ್ಲಿ ದೆವ್ವ ಬರೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಅದು ಗೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತೆ ನಾಯಿಗಳಿಗೆ, ಸೊ ನಾಯಿಗಳು ಅದನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ತವೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬೊಗಳ್ತವೆ ಅಂತ. ಬಟ್ ದಿ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್, ನನ್ನ ಒಬ್ರು ಸೈಂಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಒಬ್ರು ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, ಅವರು ಬೀದಿ ನಾಯಿಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆನೆ ಫಾರ್ ದಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ 15 ವರ್ಷದಿಂದ ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. So there are lots of things that we don't know about dogs. Dogs are the man's best friend. We have been living with them probably for 7,000-8,000 years. Correct. They have been pet animals to us. But ಆದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಅವುಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಮಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರೋದು ತುಂಬಾ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹೊತ್ತಲ್ಲಿ ಅವು ಕೂಗೋದು ಇನ್ನೇನು ಇಲ್ಲ. ಈಗ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ನಲ್ಲ, ಎವಲ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್, ಸೋಷಿಯಲ್ ಬಯಾಲಜಿ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ಈ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕೂಡ ಬೇರೆ ಗುಣಗಳ ಹಾಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಪ್ರಾಣಿಗಳಿಂದ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಹಿಂದೆ ಇದ್ದ ನಮ್ಮ ಪೂರ್ವಜರಿಂದ ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬಂದಿರುವಂತ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ನ ಕೆಲವು ಅಂಶಗಳು. ಅಂತ ಅಂಶಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾಯಿಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಅವು ಗುಂಪು ಕಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಬೆಳೆದಿರುವಂತ ಅರಣ್ಯದಲ್ಲಿ, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ಸೆಪರೇಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಆ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ ಹೋಗಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ರಾತ್ರಿ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು ಒಂದು ನಾಯಿ ಕೂಗಿದ್ರೆ ಉಳಿದದ್ದು ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತೆ ದೇ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಹೈರಾರ್ಕಿ. ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಮನೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ಒಂದು ರಾಜ ಆಗತ್ತೆ, ಉಳಿದವು ಬೇರೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಈ ರೀತಿ ಹಿಂಡ್ ಕಟ್ಟೋದ್ರಲ್ಲಿ ಬೀದಿ ನಾಯಿಗಳು ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಇವು ಅಷ್ಟೇ. ಆ ಬಿಹೇವಿಯರ್ ಇಂದಾಗಿ ಈ ಒಂದು ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹೊತ್ತು ಅವು ಕೂಗೋದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಅಂಡ್ ಮೋಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಡಾಗ್ಸ್ ಆರ್ ನಿಶಾಚರಿಗಳು. ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹೊತ್ತು ಎಚ್ಚರವಾಗಿರ್ತವೆ, ಚುರುಕಾಗಿರ್ತವೆ, ಬೆಳಗಿನ ಹೊತ್ತು ನಿದ್ದೆ ಮಾಡ್ತವೆ. ನಾವು ಇದನ್ನ ಗಮನಿಸಬಹುದು ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೂ. ಈ ಒಂದು ಇದನ್ನ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅವರ ಕ್ಯೂರಿಯಾಸಿಟಿ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆಗೆ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ಕಿಲ್ಲಿಂಗ್ ದಿ ಕ್ಯೂರಿಯಾಸಿಟಿ. Can you divert the curiosity towards the right question? Asking the questions in the right way. ಈಗ ನಾನು ಹೌದು ಅದು ದೆವ್ವದಿಂದ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ದಿ ಕ್ಯೂರಿಯಾಸಿಟಿ is satisfied. There is an answer. But then there is a fear. The next question will not be asked. So as a teacher, it's our responsibility to answer a question in such a way that there will be a supplementary question that comes into the mind of the child. ಆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತನ್ನೋದು ನನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಇದು. ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಐ ಆಮ್ ನಾಟ್ ಎ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಿಂಗ್ ಟೀಚರ್. ಸೊ ನಾನು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸಮಸ್ಯೆಗಳೇನಿವೆ ಎತ್ತ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹೇಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಬಟ್ ಥಿಯರಿಟಿಕಲಿ ನಾವು ಆಸ್ ಎ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಎ ಟೀಚರ್. ಸೊ ಆಸ್ ಎ ಪೇರೆಂಟ್ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳನ್ನು ಬೆಳೆಸಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಈ ರೀತಿಯ ಒಂದು ಮನೋಭಾವ ಅವರಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೋ ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡೋದಾದ್ರೆ ಬಹಳ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯದು. That is most
quite agree with you. I think channelizing curiosity, I agree. Though I like I said, I still hold that view that fostering curiosity ಅನ್ನೋದು ಕಷ್ಟ ಇದೆ ಅಂತ ನಮಗೆ ನನ್ನ ಭಾವನೆ. I just wanted to now move to the next this one. How did podcasting and the audio medium minus the visual, that is what I'm asking.
Okay.
Because for dissemination of science, intuitively one would think that the audiovisual medium is the most suitable medium, particularly for a subject like science. So how have you been able to bridge that apparent gap by doing successfully so many audio podcasts? What is the secret of the success? Because I've been trying to, think of this. I've listened to your podcast and I've always wondered, I am able to get a visual picture of what you are saying every time it happens. It's an experiment that I have done.
Oh, thank
and
you.
Therefore, I'm asking this question. So.
Thank you. Audio is, see, the audio medium has that power. Our audio medium, when used appropriately, it should actually substitute the visual medium. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಕಾಣದೇ ಇರುವುದನ್ನ, ನಮಗೆ ನೋಡಕ್ಕಾಗದೇ ಇರುವುದನ್ನ, ಆ ಅನುಭವವನ್ನ ಶಬ್ದ ನಮಗೆ ತಂದು ಕೊಡಬೇಕು. ಆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಆದ್ರೆ ಆಗ ನಾವು ಶ್ರವಣ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅದರ ಸಕ್ಸಸ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ವಿ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟೆಡ್ ದಿಸ್ ಪಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಫಾರ್ 2 reasons. ನಾಟ್ ದಟ್ ಆಡಿಯೋ ಮೀಡಿಯಂ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ನಾಟ್ ಬೀನ್ ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಅರ್ಲಿಯರ್. ಆಡಿಯೋ ಮೀಡಿಯಂನ ರೇಡಿಯೋಗಳು ಬಹಳ ಸಮರ್ಪಕವಾಗಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬಹಳ ಎಫೆಕ್ಟಿವ್ ಆಗಿ ಬಹಳ ಹಿಂದೆ ಯೂಸ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾವೆ. ಇಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಬೀನ್ ಯೂಸ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ಬ್ರಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಫಾರ್ ಕ್ವೈಟ್ ಸಮ್ ಟೈಮ್. ಪಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಇಸ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಎ ನ್ಯೂ ಅವೆನ್ಯೂ. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ಸ್ ನಥಿಂಗ್ ನ್ಯೂ ಫಾರ್ ದಿ ಆಡಿಯೋ ಮೀಡಿಯಂ. ಬಟ್ these days there is one more issue that we found in the schools when we went around and talked to teachers and all. A good number of students had difficulty in doing self study. So I was fortunate that I could get the books and read on my own and expand my horizons. But this opportunity is not available for many students because there are two problems. One was the issue of available resources. So that can be easily solved. You can get the books, distribute and provide the resources, but then you can give the water, or you can take the horse to the water. To make the horse to drink is the important problem, and there it must have the thirst. The thirst is not there, not because they don't want to read or study, but because of the fear that the language of the textbooks is not the one that we usually encounter. And this is one of the major drawbacks of science, even in English. I'm not saying only about Kannada. English textbook nalli kuda science anta annodu berede ಭಾಷೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. So ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, it appears like we are in a different world and it is an alien world. So to bridge this gap, one of the suggestion was to bring out audio books. There were not many audio books at the time in Kannada and even in English. So we thought we will do this, but then people were a little hesitant because it will be a very costly affair. And why did I choose audio medium? I and Praveen rather, because you can also look at the audio visual medium, that is the video and all, but that will be very cost intensive. And with the available technologies, we thought that audio medium can be handled easily. So this was the only, so we prepared a template and showed it to some teachers. They liked it very much. And that's how Jana Suddhi, the podcast, was born. And subsequently it became popular. And from 20 to 200, 200 to 800 to now 3000 people. It goes, and from a weekly podcasting, it was changed to a daily podcast 2 years ago, because teachers wanted it to be short and focused. Earlier we used to have a magazine format where 3 or 4 different items used to be stitched together, and a half-an-hour program used to be podcast. So they wanted it to be short and sweet, and this was the other way. And this is, in the strictest sense, this is not a podcast. What we are doing today in Conversations is a podcast generally people think about. Okay, it's a usually a discussion, a conversation, or even a news item or things like that, but the format will be different, and then the distribution will also be different. We chose social media, especially messenger services like WhatsApp ಅನ್ನು ಯಾಕೆ ನಾವು ಬಳಸ್ಕೊಂಡ್ವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ, ನಾವು ಆರಂಭ ಮಾಡಿದ ಟೈಮ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟರ್ನೆಟ್ ಪೆನೆಟ್ರೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕಡೆಯಲ್ಲೂ ಇಂಟರ್ನೆಟ್ ನ ಅವೈಲಬಿಲಿಟಿ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದು ಇರ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಬಹುದಂತದ್ದು ವಾಟ್ಸಪ್ ಮೂಲಕ ಮಾಡಬಹುದಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಯಾವಾಗ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಇಂಟರ್ನೆಟ್ ಸಿಗುತ್ತೋ ಅವಾಗ ಅವರು ಅದನ್ನ ಡೌನ್ಲೋಡ್ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಮತ್ತೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಬಳಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂತ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರೀಮಿಂಗ್ ಕೂಡ ನಾವು ಮಾಡಬಹುದು, ಆದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಆಡಿಯನ್ಸ್ಗೆ ತಲುಪೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಅಷ್ಟು ಸಾಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಈಗಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಮೆಜಾರಿಟಿ ಆಫ್ ಅವರ್ ಆಡಿಯನ್ಸ್ reside in remote places, and for them science gets through Jana Suddhi. And I came to know some time back from one of my friends who was from Chikmagalur and who is a researcher in Bhopal, and he told me that he has seen some schools in Chikmagalur district play Jana Suddhi regularly.
Just for the audience and the audience that is also will be on YouTube. So just that this Jana Suddhi is available as an audio file that is distributed via podcast, via the WhatsApp. This one. But it is also can be accessed, as I've seen, on Google Podcasts, on Anchor, as well as on Spotify. I think it's available on all three platforms. I've seen it these three platforms additionally. Just that I wanted to share that information. So that is one. There is somebody who has raised his or her hand, but I don't know ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೆಸರಿಲ್ಲ ನಿಮ್ದು. ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ನೀವು ಐಡೆಂಟಿಫೈ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ನಾನು ಮಾಡಬಹುದು.
ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅಂತ, BS ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅಂತ, ಶರ್ಮಾ ಅವರು ಗೊತ್ತು.
ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೂರ್ತಿ ಅವರೇ ಹೇಳಿ.
ಇಲ್ಲ, ನನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ, ನೀವು ಅವಾಗ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಿರುವಾಗ ಇವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರಿ, ಮರ್ತೇ ನಾನು. ಕಾರಂತರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ನೀವು ಕಾರಂತರ ಪ್ರಭಾವ ಹೇಗಿತ್ತು, ಕಾರಂತರ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಪ್ರಪಂಚ ಆ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ?
ನಿಜ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಕಾರಂತರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಿತ್ತು ಬಹಳ ತಡವಾಗಿ. ಸೊ ಕಾರಂತರ ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳನ್ನ ಅವು ಅಷ್ಟು ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ನಮಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ ನಾನಿದ್ದಂತ ಊರಿನಲ್ಲಿ. ಬಹುಶಃ ನಿಮಗೂ ಗೊತ್ತಿರ್ಬೇಕು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಕಾರಂತರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ಮೈಸೂರಿಗೆ ಬಂದಾಗ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಗ್ರಾಜುಯೇಷನ್ ಬಂದಾಗ, ನನಗೆ ಅವರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅಂಡರ್ ಗ್ರಾಜುಯೇಷನ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದ್ರು ಆ ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳು ಸುಲಭವಾಗಿ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಗೊಂದು ವಿಷಯ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು. ಕೊಳ್ಳೇಗಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವಿದ್ದಾಗ ಈ ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳನ್ನ ಪಡೆಯುವುದು ಕೂಡ ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ಆಗ ನಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಂತ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಸಾಧಾರಣವಾಗಿ 1980ರ ದಶಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಾಲ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಆರಂಭ ಆಯ್ತು. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಮುಂಚೆ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಲೋಕ ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳಿದ್ರು ಕೂಡ ಅವುಗಳ ಮಾರಾಟ ಮತ್ತೆ ವಿತರಣೆ ಅಷ್ಟೊಂದಾಗಿ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಸೊ ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬಹಳ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಇತ್ತು. ಸುಧಾ ಮತ್ತೆ ಪ್ರಜಾವಾಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಬರ್ತಿದ್ದಂತಹ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಲೇಖನಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಓದ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಒಂದು. ಎರಡನೇದು, ಈ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಟುಡೇ ಆಗ್ಲಿ, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟರ್ ಆಗ್ಲಿ, ಇವೆರಡೇ ಆಗ ಇದ್ದಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದಂತ ಎರಡು ಪ್ರಮುಖ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ಪತ್ರಿಕೆಗಳು, ಇಂಗ್ಲಿಷ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ. ಅವು ಕೂಡ ನಮಗ್ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಟುಡೇ ತಗೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಮೈಸೂರಿಗೆ ಬರಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು, ಅಥವಾ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟರ್ ತಗೊಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೂ ಮೈಸೂರಿಗೆ ಬರಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಆ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು 10 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಫೀಸ್ ಕಟ್ಟೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಒದ್ದಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಂತ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಮೈಸೂರಿಗೆ 1.5 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ನಾನು ಫೇರ್ ಕೊಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಬಂದು ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ತಗೊಂಡು ಹೋಗೋದು ಬಹಳ ಕಷ್ಟ ಆಗ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಬಟ್ ಸುದೈವಕ್ಕೆ ಏನು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಜನ ನಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯರಿದ್ರು, ಮೈಸೂರು ಮತ್ತೊಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಓಡಾಡೋರಿದ್ರು, ಬಸ್ನವರೆಲ್ಲ ಇದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆಲ್ಲ ಕಾಡಿ ಬೇಡಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನೀವು ಹೋದಾಗ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಜ್ಯೂಸ್ ಸೆಂಟರ್ ಪಕ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿ ಫಲಾಮೃತ ಜ್ಯೂಸ್ ಇತ್ತಲ್ಲ, ಅದರ ಪಕ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿ ನ್ಯೂಸ್ ಹೌಸ್ ಇರ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಆ ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಒಂದ್ಸರ್ತಿ ಕೇಳಿ, ಅವ್ರು ಪ್ರತಿ ಸರ್ತಿ ವಿಚಾರಿಸೋರು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋದಾಗ ಏನಾದ್ರು ಬಂದಿದ್ಯಾ ಅಂತ. ಬಂದಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಬಂದು ಹೇಳೋರು, ಬಂದ್ ದಿವ್ಸ ಹೊತ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದು ಕೊಡೋರು. ಸೊ ಈ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ನಾನು ಬಹುಶಃ ಅಲ್ಲೊಂದು ಅಂಗಡಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರನ್ನ ಒಪ್ಪಿಸಿ ಒಂದು ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್ ಅನ್ನ ತರಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಟುಡೇ. ಬಹುಶಃ ಇಡೀ ಚಾಮರಾಜನಗರ ಡಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿಕ್ಟ್ಗೆ ಅದು ಒಂದೇ ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿತ್ತು. ನಾನು ಕೊಳ್ಳೇಗಾಲ ಬಿಟ್ಟ ಮೇಲೂ ಕೂಡ ಸುಮಾರು ವರ್ಷ ಅದು ಒಂದೇ ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್ ಬರ್ತಿತ್ತು. ಆಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದ್ಸರ್ತಿ ಹೋದಾಗ, ಸರ್ ಇದು ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್ ಯಾರು ತಗೊಳ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತಂದ್ರು. ಅವ್ರ ಹತ್ರ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದೆಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ತಗೊಂಡು ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾನು ಅದನ್ನ ನಿಲ್ಲಿಸ್ಬಿಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾಯ್ತು. ಸೊ ಹೀಗೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಅದು ಅರಿವಾಗಿದ್ದು ಕೂಡ ನಾನು ಬಹುಶಃ ಕೊಳ್ಳೇಗಾಲದಲ್ಲೇ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ರೆ 99% ನನಗೆ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಟುಡೇ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್ ಇದೆ ಅಂತಾನು ನನಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗ್ತಿರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಸಂದರ್ಭ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೆ ಬೇರೆ. ನಾನು ಒಂದ್ಸರ್ತಿ ಕೇರಳಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಕೇರಳದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ತಿಂಗಳು ಕಳಿಬೇಕಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನನಗೆ ಭಾಷೆ ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತೆ ನನ್ನ ಜೊತೆ ಇದ್ದಂತ ಪಿಯರ್ ಗ್ರೂಪ್ ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದವರೆಲ್ಲ ನನ್ನ ಕಸಿನ್ಸು, ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಹುಡುಗಿಯರು, ಹುಡುಗರು ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದ್ದವರು ತುಂಬಾ ಚಿಕ್ಕವರು. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಒಂಟಿ ತಂದಲ್ಲಿ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಊರ್ ಸುತ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ನಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸುತ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ. ಸುತ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಕಂಡಿದ್ದು ಇದೊಂದು ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್. ಆಗ ಅದನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ಓದೋದಿಕ್ಕೆ ಶುರು ಮಾಡಿದೆ. 7ನೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸೋ 8ನೇ ಕ್ಲಾಸೋ ಇರಬೇಕು. ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಮುಂದಕ್ಕೆ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನ ತನ್ನ ಪಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ನನ್ನ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಬಂದ್ಬಿಡ್ತು.
ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ನಾನು ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಟುಡೇ, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ಓದ್ತಿದ್ದೆ. ಅದೇ ತರ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ನೀವು KR ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಒಂದು ಬುಕ್ ಶಾಪ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಸೌಹಾರ್ದ ಬುಕ್ ಶಾಪ್, ಮತ್ತೆ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಮ್ಯಾಗಝಿನ್ ಶಾಲೆ ಒಂದಿತ್ತು. ನಾನು ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ರಿಪೋರ್ಟ್, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಟುಡೇ ಮುಖಾಂತರ ನನಗೆ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಪರಿಚಯ ಆಗ್ತಿತ್ತು, ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ ಜಾಗ್ರಫಿ, ಸೈಂಟಿಫಿಕ್ ನನ್ನ ಓದಿನ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ. ಯಾಕೆಂದ್ರೆ ಕಾರಂತರು ಅವತ್ತಿನ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ನನಗೆ ಗೂಗಲ್ ತರ, ನಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ ಬಿಟ್ಟು, ನಮಗೆ ಸಾಹಿತ್ಯ, ಅವರ ಇದು ಯಕ್ಷಗಾನ ಬಿಟ್ಟು ವಿಜ್ಞಾನನ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಜನಕ್ಕೆ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕದಲ್ಲಿ ತಲುಪಿಸಿದವರು. ಕನ್ನಡದಲ್ಲಿ ನಮಗೆ ನಿಜ 5 ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳು ನನ್ನ ಹತ್ರ ಆಗ್ಲೇ ತುಂಬಾ ಖುಷಿ ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಎಷ್ಟು ಬಾರಿ ಓದಿದ್ರು ಮತ್ತೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕಲ್ಪನೆಗೆ ತಂದು ಕೊಟ್ಟ ಪುಸ್ತಕದ ಒಂದು ಸಂಗ್ರಹ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮೇಲೆ ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಕಾರಂತರೇ ನಮಗೆ ಗೂಗಲ್ ಅಂತ
ಆದ್ರೆ ನನಗೆ ಕಾರಂತರ ಪ್ರಭಾವಕ್ಕಿಂತ ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ನನಗೆ ಪ್ರಭಾವ ಬಂದಿದ್ದು BGL ಸ್ವಾಮಿ ಅವರದ್ದು. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಪ್ರಕಟ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ಪುಸ್ತಕ 1981ರಲ್ಲಿ. ಅದು ಪ್ರಕಟ ಆದ ಕೂಡಲೇ ನಾನು ಅದನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡ್ ಬಂದು ಅದನ್ನ ಓದಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರಿಂದ ಹೆಚ್ಚು ಪ್ರಭಾವ ಆಗಿತ್ತು. ಕಾರಂತರದ್ದು ಅಷ್ಟರಲ್ಲೇ ತುಂಬಾ ಹಳತಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಹಳತು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ಸಿಗ್ತಾ ಇರ್ಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಒಂದು ಶಾರ್ಟ್ ಕಮಿಂಗ್. ಬಟ್ ಆಮೇಲೆ ನಾನು ಕಾರಂತರನ್ನು ಭೇಟಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ, ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ, ಅವರ ಪುಸ್ತಕಗಳನ್ನ ಓದಿದ್ದೇನೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರಭಾವ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ ಅತಿ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾಗಿರುವಂತದ್ದು BGL ಸ್ವಾಮಿ ಅವರದ್ದು.
ಹೌದು, ನಿಜ. ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದು ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿಕ್ ಆಗಿರೋರಿಗೆ. ನಾನ್ ಅಕಾಡೆಮಿಷಿಯನ್ಗೆ ನನ್ಗೆ ಒಂದೇ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ದು, ಕಾರಂತರು ಹೆಚ್ಚು ರೀಚ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರಲ್ವಾ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇತ್ತು.
ಆದ್ರೆ ಈಗಿನ ಕಾಲದಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾರಂತರನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಯಾರು ನೆನಪಿಸ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಿಲ್ಲ, ಪೂರ್ಣಚಂದ್ರ ತೇಜಸ್ವಿ ಅಂತಂತಾರೆ. ಆದ್ರೆ ತೇಜಸ್ವಿ ಅವ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಂದು ಕೆಲವು ದೂರುಗಳು ಇವೆ. ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲದೆ ಇರುವಂತದ್ದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಅವರು ಅನುವಾದ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಸಾಕಷ್ಟು ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲರ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ರು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ದೂರಿದೆ. ಸೊ ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಕ್ಯೂರಿಯಾಸಿಟಿ ಬೇರೆ ಕಡೆ. ರಮೇಶ್,
ಐ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಟೇಕ್ ಇಟ್ ಟು ಒನ್ ಮೋರ್ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಮಕ್ಕಳು ಮತ್ತೆ ಇದ್ರದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು
ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೂರ್ತಿ.
ಕೃಷ್ಣಮೂರ್ತಿ. ಇವಾಗ there is an argument that is made, so that parents often push their children into science. ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಓದಬೇಕು, ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ಇರಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ. Even when children sometimes don't have the aptitude or the inclination for it. ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಅದರ for example, some children ನಾನು ನೋಡಿದ್ದು naturally ಇವಾಗ gravitate towards the humanities.
ಹೌದು.
And it is my opinion that the humanities ಭಾರತದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ have simply not been allowed to grow in India. ನಮ್ಮ ವಿದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ particularly the study of ಹಿಸ್ಟರಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಸಿವಿಲೈಸೇಷನಲ್ ಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು, ಹೆರಿಟೇಜ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. And even those who study in India, they see only one world view, the Marxist, Leninist, social justice view. So your thoughts on that? Are we pushing people into science even when they are not inclined towards it?
I would put it this way. Even for humanities, an understanding of science would be always much better. ಯಾಕಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಈಗ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ, ಇದು ನನ್ನ ಜನರಲ್ ಒಪಿನಿಯನ್. ಇಟ್ ಮೇ ನಾಟ್ ಬಿ 100% ಟ್ರೂ. ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಲೆವೆಲ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ we get detached both from humanities and also life sciences unless we are a BSc CBZ graduate. ಇವಾಗ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ there is lot more fractionation. So we study highly specialized subjects like biotechnology or other things, but that doesn't give you a complete wholesome understanding of what science is or how we do the science. Okay, for me science is not a subject, it's a way of life, it's a way of thinking, it's a way how we assimilate knowledge. It is not just a subject, a physics, chemistry or biology or mathematics. It is a way of assimilating the knowledge, understanding the world. So ee concept anna navu itkondaga there are a few principles that science follows. Okay, so it is, of course, the first one is questioning, the second one is seeking the answers, and then the testing the answers. Okay, and we as traditionalists, we have been using the first two but not the third one. So that's where the Indian science lagged and tanbitu experts ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. I'm not an expert, but I would say this.
Testing of hypothesis.
Yes. So testing of what we consider as answers. Are they real answers or could there be another answer? That is what is the experiment is all about. ಈ ಒಂದು the methodology of science ಇದೆಲ್ಲ, this is left out. Second thing is, unless I'm a little biased towards biology, because especially in biology towards evolution, because evolution, like you said, it encompasses a lot of things that we see around us. And if we look in the light of the evolution, everything that moves around us, we start looking at things as in a different perspective, not as animals, not as something, a disease causing organism, not as a enemy, but instead we look at them as a sort of a collaborator. And how do we live together, or how do we, if it is a pathogen, how do we escape from its influence rather than kill it? Okay, so this kind of philosophy one can develop if one gets a deeper understanding of this. So develop a lot of empathy towards nature if you are a biologist, which is
Absolutely.
missing in most of the young. Yes, we talk a lot about environment. We go and weekends, we spend our time in beautiful environments and all these things. But are we really empathy? Do we really have that empathy towards this? And if we see a ant, do we always question how does this ant survive in this dry environment inside the house? Where does it get its food? Does it all, bother us? No, we don't. So this is what I call as the learning.
I quite agree. I think both of us, I mean, quite agree on this, because I also strongly believe that evolutionary biology, like you said, is a testable hypothesis in the present, in the real world.
I must tell you something at this context. In the testing of evolutionary hypothesis, we Indians are the topmost now. A number of researchers in India have been doing experiments on how evolution happens and shown very, very interesting things. So because we don't talk more about that and we talk more about rockets, we know more about rockets and rocket failures rather than how evolution happens and how that affects all of us. And I must tell you this, because the best evolutionary biologists at the moment are plenty in India.
So, okay, so I just a couple of questions that are tied to what you said right now. So, one is, I completely agree that evolutionary biology is. I think the COVID crisis itself showed us how the virus itself mutated, which is also in a sense a very quick evolution in its own structure to a change in the nature and the way humans started to react to the virus itself in that sense. And so, and we also see it like you brought up the issue of the household things. You can actually see it even in your own gardens, how plants start reacting to some of the stimuli that you start providing to them, and how they evolve to overcome some of those stimuli, or the insects and pests that feed on those plants. So in that context, it's very interesting to know. It's something that I did not know. For example, that India has in fact has the most number of evolutionary biologists today. So in that context, I just wanted to bring out this point. Now, India has now one of the lowest number of science researchers and publishers in the world. Despite all the push, we're not seeing cutting edge science work or even any effort in that direction. I think we are producing less than 1/4 of what I think China produces. If I last remember the statistics in terms of publications, research publications. How do you think we can address this?
See, there are two issues in this. One is the number of research papers is a measure that is used on the amount of the investment that we make on science. Okay, it doesn't mean that we have the quality, whether it is China or India or this, and even quality parameters also differ. So what is a good quality paper in physics? Okay, may be published in a very high profile journal or even a very low profile journal. So there are examples of this. For example, Einstein didn't publish it in Nature. It was published in a different journal. Okay, and similarly, what is published in a very not so well-known journal may be a very significant development of understanding. Okay, second thing, what happens is that our understanding of our means the media and the common people's understanding of what science is something different from what scientists consider. Okay, for me, science is, like I said, all that is done using the methodology of science. That's what the scientists believe. And as a commoner, what interests me is what affects me in a day-to-day life. So these are two different things. So one is the technology. That means the technology which affects me day to day. That brings a lot of curiosity rather than something like I would say a house lizard living with you forever. It is not afraid of humans. We never consider that. Okay, and it lives with us. It lives with many other things. I would have shown you today. I saw a beautiful thing. You have seen the now Savar Kalu anta heltivala millipede. It was going along with that. There was a caterpillar. Both of them were going in the same direction. So I was wondering, why do they want to go in the same direction? Both are two different animals, so they could go anywhere else. And I watched them for some time. It was interesting that both started from a far off distance, both came together and both moved together to a different direction. I don't know what was the reason. Both are not the same animal. Okay, it is not andre ನಾವು ರಿಲೇಷನ್ಸೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅವು ಅಷ್ಟು ಡಿಫರೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತವು ಒಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವು ಅಂತಂದಾಗ the curiosity should be there with us to understand why this, or at least ask a question about this. ಆ ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಇದಿರಬೇಕು. ನಾವು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಸೈನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ಇಫ್ ಐ ಆಸ್ಕ್ ಎ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಅಂಡ್ ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ try to answer that, for most of us that is not an interesting science. For most of us, what will be an interesting science is how can the that animal can be used in my day-to-day life for some benefit. These are two different things. One is science, the other one is knowledge, the other one is application of knowledge or technology, what we call. ಸೊ ಈ ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿ ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಫೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಟೆಕ್ನಾಲಜಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಳ್ಳೆಯದು ಇದೆ, ಕೆಟ್ಟದ್ದು ಇದೆ, ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂತ ಯಾರು ಹೇಳುದಿಲ್ಲ. ಅಂಡ್ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದಿ ನಾಲೆಜ್ ದಟ್ ನಾವು ಸಾಧಾರಣವಾಗಿ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥದ್ದು. ಬಟ್ ವೇರ್ ಡು ವಿ get distracted is that the technology overwhelms us most of the time, and we think that that is science. And if that is taking us to a direction which we don't like, okay, or which we didn't expect, I wouldn't say it takes us to a deliberately it takes us to a bad situation. I would say we didn't expect. So I can always say this: smartphones were beautiful tools for us, but then smartphones are not the villains like we say, or were not thought to be the villains like we say, in many contexts. It's only a tool. Okay, it was conceived in all good intentions, but then it can also be used for bad intentions. So it's always that aspect is there. But what happens is that we look at the other aspect, that how it negatively affects us, and so we go and consider that only. But the science per se doesn't intentionally look at things as bad. It only gathers the knowledge, tries to answer the question. This is one way of doing that. But there are science philosophers and people who have been in this field who also know that science is done for different purposes. Okay, and that's a different aspect. So for me, science is answering a curious question.
Very interesting. Very interesting when you spoke about the centipede and the millipede and this one, the caterpillar. Very interesting. One of the things that I observe very often is that ನಮ್ಮ ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ಗೋಡೆ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರೋ ಹಲ್ಲಿ ಕ್ಯಾಲೆಂಡರ್ ಹಿಂದೆ ಇರುತ್ತೆ ಅದು, ಬಟ್ ನಾವು ಲೈಟ್ ಹಾಕಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಆಚೆ. Because it has somehow that it is a Pavlovian response now for it, because it knows that light ಹಾಕಿದ ತಕ್ಷಣ insects ಬರುತ್ತೆ, insects ಮೇಲೆ I can feed.
Exactly. Yes.
So it has also
you just imagine if it learns how to switch on the light.
Yeah.
What would be the consequence? Okay, that is science fiction.
That is science fiction. Yeah, but it's an observation that they keep making. Every time we switch on the light, the lizard will appear because it knows insects will be attracted to the light.
See that you're curious only to some extent. The next curious question would be, does it come only if this light is switched on or the other light is switched on? That's the next question. So science goes like this only in small steps. Each question is answered and then another question is asked. And sometimes the question may be similar. So the people will ask why it is a waste of this one. If you say that, okay, since the halli ಒಂದು ಲೈಟ್ ಆನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ ಕೂಡಲೇ ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಲೈಟ್ ಆನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಬರುತ್ತೋ ಇಲ್ವೋ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಯಾಕೆ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು, ಬರ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲಿ. But for a scientific mind, this is a curious thing. Has it learned it? Is the Pavlovian, as you said, the response only limited to this, or is it a general response? Do all lizards behave this way, or only this lizard? And is the lizard in the other room also behave this way, or does it respond to only the light in that room? Okay. So these are many. These bring a lot of other questions. So that's what I mean. The curiosity never dies.
ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಕೇಳಬಹುದಾ?
Ramesh ಅವರು.
Almost out of time, sir. You can leave it in the chat and I can share it with Professor Sharma. And
ಸಿಂಪಲ್ ಒಂದೇ ಕ್ವಶನ್. ತಿಗಣೆ, ಚೇಳು, ಸಾವಿರ ಕಾಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾತಾಡೋದು, ಮನೆಯಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲ ಬಳಸೋದು ಕಪ್ಪೆ. ಈ ತಿಗಣೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ಚೇಳುಗಳು ಇತ್ತೀಚೆಗೆ ನೋಡ್ತಾನೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಜಿರಳೆ ಅಂತೂ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ ಎವಲ್ಯೂಷನರಿಲಿ. ನನ್ನ ಬಾಲ್ಯದ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಕೊಳ್ಳೇಗಾಲವರೆಗೂ ನೆನಪಿರಬಹುದು ತಿಗಣೆಗಳು, ಚೇಳುಗಳು ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದು. ಅದರ ಕುತೂಹಲ ಅಷ್ಟೇ, ಇನ್ನೇನಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ತಕ್ಕಂತ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ.
ಇದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ, ಸೊ ವಿ ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಪಜಲ್ಡ್. ದಿ ಸೈಂಟಿಸ್ಟ್, ಎಸ್ಪೆಷಲಿ ದಿ ಎಂಟಮಾಲಜಿಸ್ಟ್, ಆರ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ ಪಜಲ್ಡ್ ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ದೇರ್ ಆರ್ ಮೆನಿ ಇನ್ಸೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಅಬೌಟ್ ವಿಚ್ ವಿ ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಇವನ್ ಅವೇರ್ ಆಫ್. You are aware of chelu and you are aware of tigane, which are not seen these days. Okay, probably we have destroyed the environment where they could live peacefully. Okay, that's one reason. The other thing is, the whole world is changing so much. What we call as climate change, it is bringing in, there is a suspicion that a lot more insects which we may not even be aware of are will not survive. About 60 to 70% of them may die or may change even before we find them ಅಂತನೋ ಒಂದು ಮಾತಿದೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈಗ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಕೀಟ ಪ್ರಪಂಚದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟೋ ನಮಗೆ ಪರಿಚಯನೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಅವುಗಳನ್ನ ಈ ಇಡೀ ನಮ್ಮ ಮಾನವತೆ ಅಥವಾ ಮಾನವಕುಲ ನೋಡದೇನೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತನ್ನುವ ಒಂದು ಕಳವಳವನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ವಿಜ್ಞಾನಿಗಳು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ.
There is one question in the chat. I think I'll make it the last one.
Yes.
And I think Mamta ಅವರು ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ about your how did you interest in science communication for visually impaired ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಂಟ್ರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಅದು ಶುರು ಆಯ್ತು, and how are you planning to take it forward?
Okay, it's a question. It's not a henge ಪ್ರಾರಂಭ ಆಯ್ತು ಅಂತಲ್ಲ. Again, it is a curiosity. Now when we talk about understanding or learning, okay, the learning happens mostly through our senses. And when we talk about science, science talks about things which are beyond our senses many times. Okay, when I talk about a microorganism, I cannot sense any of that. I cannot see, I cannot touch, I cannot smell. I can only smell if it acts, okay, something, when something putrefies, when something rots, okay, but otherwise I cannot smell a organism, a microorganism, and of course I cannot touch also. So many of these scientific concepts that we use today, we understand, or I should say extra sensory perception. We use tools to understand them. Now, for a person who is visually capable, this is easy. I can explain something, draw a picture and explain something so he can imagine. But how does this science understanding happen in a visually impaired? Can I talk to them about the most beautiful thing, the common billu, the rainbow? How do we talk about those things? How do we talk about a mirage? And if they try to understand that, how do they understand? These were the questions that I asked myself. And so I started talking to a few of the students, teachers, as well as scientists and other colleagues also, who were also having similar questions, and tried to understand them. And I had a good learning, and that's what I did. That's how I got interested in this. So it all has got to do with the learning process. How do we learn and how do we understand the world? Does it, if I don't have one sense, if I have a deficiency in one sense, does my understanding of the world change? And if that change happens, and what kind of a change, what kind of a discrepancy there will be? So these are some questions. ನಮ್ಮ 5 ಸೆನ್ಸರಿ ಆರ್ಗನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ನಾವೇನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಸಂವೇದನಾಂಗಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೇ ಒಂದರಲ್ಲಿ ದೋಷ ಇದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನಮ್ಮ ಅರಿವು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಅರಿತುಕೊಳ್ಳುವ ರೀತಿ, ನಾವು ಅರಿತುಕೊಂಡಂತಹ ವಿಷಯ, ಅವುಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ವ್ಯತ್ಯಾಸ ಆಗಬಹುದೇ? ಆದ್ರೆ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ? ಆ ರೀತಿ ಆಗದೆ ಇರೋ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಲಿಸಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಸರಿಯಾಗಿರುವವರಿಗೂ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸೆನ್ಸು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಇಂದ್ರಿಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ದೋಷ ಇರುವವರಿಗೂ ಒಂದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಲಿಸಬೇಕು ಅಂತಂದ್ರೆ ಏನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬಂದಾಗ ನಾನು ಅದನ್ನ ಅರ್ಥ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೋಸ್ಕರವಾಗಿ ಈಗ ವಿಜುವಲಿ ಇಂಪೇರ್ಡ್ ಅಂತ ಏನ್ ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ, ಅವರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಕೂತು ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡಿ ಅವ್ರು ಹೆಂಗೆ ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಹೇಗೆ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತಿಳ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಪ್ರಯತ್ನ ಪಟ್ಟೆ. ಒಂದು ಉದಾಹರಣೆ ಹೇಳ್ತೇನೆ.
ಅದೇ ನಾನು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದೆ, ಬಿಕಾಸ್ ಇಸ್ ಇಟ್ ದ ಸೇಮ್ ಒನ್ ದಟ್ ಯು ರೆಫರ್ ಟು ಅವತ್ತು ಮಾತಾಡಿದಾಗ ಕೈಯಲ್ಲಿ ಮುಟ್ಟಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಏರಿಯಾ.
ಬಟ್ ಐ ವಿಲ್ ಟೆಲ್ ಎ ಡಿಫರೆಂಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್. ಈಗ ಉದಾಹರಣೆಗೆ ದೇರ್ ಲೈಫ್ ಇಸ್ ಡಿಫರೆಂಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ನಾವು ದೋಸೆ ಹಾಕೋದು ಬಹಳ ಸುಲಭ. ಸೊ ನಾನು ರೆಸಿಪಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ, ನೀವು ಒಂದು ತವಾ ಇಟ್ಟು, ತವಾ ಬಿಸಿ ಆದ ಕೂಡಲೇ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಎಣ್ಣೆ ಹಾಕಿ ಅದು ಚೊಯ್ ಅಂದ ಕೂಡಲೇ ನೀವು ದೋಸೆ ಹಿಟ್ಟನ್ನು ಅದರ ಮೇಲೆ ಹಾಕಿ ಹರಡಿಬಿಡಿ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಬಟ್ ಫಾರ್ ದೆಮ್ ದಿ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಈಸ್, ಹರಡೋದು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಷ್ಟರವರೆಗೆ ಹರಡಬೇಕು? ದೇ ಕಾಂಟ್ ಸಿ. ತವಾದಿಂದ ಆಚೆಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು, ತವಾದ ಒಳಗೆ ಅದು ಬೇರೆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ಹೌ ಡು ದೇ ಡೂ ದಾಟ್? ದೋಸೆ ಮಾಡೋರಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಹೆಂಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರ ಅವರು? ತುಂಬಾ ಸಿಂಪಲ್. ನಮಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ದೃಷ್ಟಿ ಇರುವವರಿಗೆ ಇದನ್ನ ಮಾಡೋದು ಸಿಂಪಲ್. ಬಟ್ ನಾನು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೇಳಿದಾಗ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ಬರು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದು, ನಾನು ಒಂದು ತವಾಗೆ 3 ಸೌಟ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಪೂರ್ತಿ ತುಂಬುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ನಾನು ಲೆಕ್ಕ ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಒಂದೊಂದು ಸೌಟಾಗಿ ಹಾಕ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ನಾನು ಹರಡ್ತೀನಿ, ಅಷ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಸಿ, ದಿ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ವರ್ಲ್ಡ್ is not the same with everyone. It differs. And for a communicator, the most important thing is what he understands, he has to convey the same thing to the other one. Whether he is, has all the senses competent or some of the senses deficient. So how do we do that? It's a challenge for the communicators. And that's the question that is nagging me. And that will be a question which will be also important for teachers and for anybody who deals with people who have a deficiency in senses.
Very, very interesting point at which perhaps we have to end what I think would be only part 1 of, we might need to have more conversations, because I think we have more questions and the whole idea of, communicating, talking about science is about having more questions. So I think it's a good place to end this. I want to thank you. I also want to inform the people that next week we will have Aditi Banerjee. Aditi Banerjee is a lawyer who practices in the US. She's also an author. She's written several books. So we will have a conversation with her. But I also want to take this opportunity, sir. So thank you for having given us the time and shared your thoughts. I think you've in the sense that you've told us how you even what little you've shared has helped us understand how your mind works and how you build all of this things. Because to me, the podcast as well as all that you do in terms of science and is continues to be in a sense intriguing in how you're doing it. So I'm also very curious to know how you go about doing all of those podcasts and other things, and therefore more power to you, more strength to you, and hope you can bring more such communications, more such information to people, and you continue to do what you want to do.
Say one sentence. Yes. I just do all this. If I think that I can do, I just do. That's it.
That's okay. So we must do. If we want to do, we must do. I think that's one message we will leave everyone with. And on behalf of SVYM, on behalf of VLEAD, I want to thank you, and I also want to thank all the participants. This also would be available, is now being streamed live on YouTube, and also a recording, slightly edited recording of this would be available on YouTube and shared with all. So thank you once again. Have a great weekend, and thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.